Well, it's great. So many people actually could came tonight. Yeah, I'm your host tonight, Andre. Been doing this for quite some time, so I think most of the people know me. If not, welcome all the new ones. It's always great to see more people coming and joining this community. Thank Swisscom for sponsoring the drinks tonight. I would like to welcome Scott Nelson from Sweetbridge, and he's gonna give us now a great talk about what Sweetbridge is all about.
So, how many of you have heard of Sweetbridge? A couple. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Sweetbridge, and then I'm going to have some of our team. It's really kind of unusual. We've never had as many team members from Sweetbridge in a meetup at the same time. So I thought I'd start by just asking each of the folks from Sweetbridge, if you wouldn't mind standing up. And we've never had as many, come on in the back there. We've never had this many people, and David over here may say hi. So anyway, thank you guys. I embarrassed everybody, but I just realized we've never had that many people at a meetup. I think we've only ever had 2 or 3. So we have to come to Zurich to get our team together, because we're all over the world, literally. And what a better place to come and meet people than Switzerland, right? That's great. So Sweetbridge started in a very basic way by asking, there has to be a better way to do some of the things that we do. And we went back to first principles and said, okay, we know a lot about business. We're kind of the business to business guys in the blockchain space. We've worked in a lot of technology companies, so a lot of our team has had deep technology experience in many technology companies. And we have economic experience. We have some Federal Reserve economist. We have a award-winning behavioral economist. If you don't know what that is, they basically try to explain why people do what they do. They construct experiments to say, well, if we set a game up like this in society, why does that happen? Freakonomics is if you ever read the book, is an example. So we have a lot of macro monetary economists that are on our team, and we have a lot of technologists, and we said, what does this blockchain thing really mean you can do differently? And we started actually thinking about people. And we went from thinking about people to thinking about assets. And we went from thinking about assets to thinking about a common problem that almost everything has in commerce, and that is something that finance people call liquidity. Most of us don't know what liquidity means, so I'll let you know what that means in a minute. And we realized that we had an opportunity with the blockchain to do something really fundamentally profound. And that what's profound is that the blockchain is the first time where the execution of the computer and the storage of the state, which is controlled by an execution stack in a machine, can actually be paired with value. So value and the execution occur together, and they can either all occur or not occur. And this is not widely talked about, known, or actually understood yet, they can occur, you can match in law. When we talk about law as smart contracts, but I'm not meaning that. I mean real world law. And we talk about value as in things like Bitcoin and Ether. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your house. I'm talking about this room. I'm talking about my coat. So what this means is that we realized that we could form an alliance. Sweetbridge is not one project. We're a project of projects. And this alliance could actually create a liquid supply chain. Now, we come from a supply chain background, so we use this language, but most people don't understand what that language means. So when people think about supply chains, their visual in their mind tends to be this boat. They think about containers coming particularly from Asia, maybe to Europe or some other location on the planet, and they think of that as a supply chain. And trucks on the road we think of as supply chains. But supply chain has become to mean something much more than that. And so when we tried to figure out how to explain what it is, we realized that it's really this. So if something didn't grow where it is, or if it wasn't created where it is, then it was either processed, stored, or moved through a supply chain. It is a product of the supply chain. So literally, it's either Mother Nature or it's the supply chain that brings you everything that you have. Everything you own, everything you use on a daily basis, everything you see whenever you look around, all the things that are beneath all the things that you see, the wires that are underneath the floor of this building. All of those things came to us through supply chains. And so supply chains are the things that make commerce work. That's what they are. And commerce represents 54 trillion of GDP. So it's 2/3 of the global economy. Now, to give this some perspective, financial services, which have received a lot of attention in the blockchain community with fintech and other kinds of things, are 13 trillion in global GDP. In fact, most of the people on Earth work in a supply chain. They don't know that, they would never say that, but that's what is true. So the farmers that are raising products in their field, they're part of a supply chain to create food and get that food to a point where you can eat it. The miners that are taking ore out of the earth are part of a supply chain that is drawing out the ore that will be turned into that electronic phone that you have in your pocket or hand. And that happens through supply chain. So the question was, how can you make these liquid, and what can you do to liquefy a supply chain? Well, there are three things that we mean by liquid. Now, water has a very interesting characteristic. It automatically seeks the path of least resistance and the lowest point. So it automatically seeks efficiency. If I poured water out at the top of these steps in a big bucket, it would just come down all these steps and come down to the bottom. It wouldn't need to be told to do that. It would just do that. And it would do that because of the laws of physics and because it's liquid. Because it's liquid, it's malleable and moves and can transform itself in shape and size to fit whatever the contours of what's happening. And so when we talk about liquidity in commerce, what we mean is liquidity of capital. So capital is money, and liquid capital means this. Liquid capital is something which can be converted into money within a short period of time with very little loss of value. That's something that's liquid in the capital sense. The second kind of liquidity is liquid assets. So it turns out that as we've gotten more complex and we've injected more marketplaces and we've become more competitive around the world, which has produced some interesting things and some positive benefits, but it's also had some interesting things that nobody predicted. And one of them is that the assets of the supply chain in the last 50 years have gone from being utilized on average at 90% of the time. So factories, warehouses, trucks, 747 airplanes, Airbuses, whatever. 50 years ago, 90% of those assets at any given time would be being utilized. Today, that number has dropped, and it has steadily dropped in a straight line trajectory to just under 75%. So just under 75% of all the factories, warehouses, trucks, planes, boats, trains, and things in the supply chain are utilized at any given time. What this means is that we are becoming less efficient. We are becoming massively less efficient. Now let's put this in context. We have 15% of $54 trillion that is not being used. So if you just made a 10% improvement, didn't even go back to where we were 50 years ago, that would be a meaningful, measurable change to the global economy you could feel. Now, the final thing is liquid talent. So there's a problem that is occurring in our society as the pace of change increases. And that problem is that the companies that we have worked for in the past are becoming ever less able to commit to us as individuals on a long-term basis. So as change increases, one of the side effects is that the company doesn't know what it's going to need in terms of skill in the future. And even if it thinks it does, 5 years later, the business the company is in has had to change because some competitor came along and did something new. Completely reinvented the space, and they're now, I either change or die. Or some new technology comes along, like the blockchain, and it reframes what I'm doing. So liquid talent is about the ability of talent to find its best use. It's to find its best use here regardless of where it is at any given time so it can get its greatest value. And in supply chains, there's an interesting phenomena, and that is that expertise in that field has been steadily becoming less and less and less valued. And what has become more and more valued is generalists. And the reason for this is that expertise has such a narrow ability to deal with a problem. And then when there's a lot of change going on, what you need is people that do generalist stuff. But one of the effects is that the supply chain has now become less and less and less efficient. So it's not just the assets that are becoming less efficient, it's also the supply chain becoming less efficient. Now finally, I want to give you one other stat that just kind of blew my mind the first time one of our economists kind of helped me understand this. Do you know there's $700 trillion worth of valued assets in the world? I didn't know this, but $700 trillion worth of valued assets. Real estate, paintings, intellectual property, stocks, bonds, all this stuff, right? There's only $60 or $70 trillion worth of currency. And it depends on how you count currency. Some people would say there's a little more than that when they include things like bearer bonds and stuff. But that's all there is. So this is actually an interesting problem because it means that at any given time, there's only about 10% of the currency necessary to actually transact trade with those assets in circulation. And so Sweetbridge is about trying to solve these three problems. We want to create liquidity of assets, the things that you own, the things that companies own that they need to do trade. And it turns out, using crypto economics, that we can take assets and we can put them on the blockchain, real-world assets, not just crypto assets, not just things like Bitcoin and Ether. You can do that for sure, but you can also take things like a title to a house, and you can lock it in the blockchain, and you can generate a currency from that. You can generate a currency from that that's backed by a promise to pay that currency back. That's what asset-backed currencies meant. That's how we went to all these fiat currencies that are just backed by economies. They were asset-backed because there were real assets, gold, other kinds of things. Asset-backed currencies can be recreated out of all the assets we have in the world. We can use the blockchain to do it, and a side effect of this, an unexpected beautiful thing, is you can give yourself a loan from assets you already have without selling them and without another party using the blockchain. Now, to make this happen, we have a protocol stack that is our roadmap, and the very first part of that stack is a liquidity protocol. Now, Sweetbridge is a nonprofit Swiss foundation. We're headquartered here in Zug, Switzerland. We have contributors all over the world from 8 different countries. This slide's a little old, by the way. I was just told as of this morning we have 49 people in the project. About a third of those are half-time or part-time, and the rest are full-time contributors. So a very large project. We have people from a variety of disciplines that you wouldn't normally see in blockchain projects, like law. We actually have lawyers, or governmental. We actually have people that work with different governmental agencies and regulators around the world. As I said before, we're an alliance, so we are made up of a variety of different companies. This is actually in projects. You'll notice these aren't like the ones everybody knows. That's because these are people working on different things that are specific to commerce or to law or to other kinds of services. And this is actually just a small set of these. Mac McGarry right here is the president of our alliance, and he's working with many, many more companies that are on this list here to actually add to this, which will hopefully soon actually include governments that will be part of the alliance. And we're about more than blockchain. Andre, where'd you go? Had his slide about AI and IoT. AI and IoT are really significant technologies that are going to intersect with blockchain in ways that are really important to do together. And so we're also trying to gather and bring together people that are doing that. One of the things that's important about blockchain projects to have any integrity is that they need to be able to actually create real business and not just have, raise a bunch of money in ICO and have a bunch of promises, but actually create real business. To do this, we have been forming ecosystems. Our 2 largest and most established are one for the supply chain and law. We're actually bringing together law firms around the world and legal tech projects in blockchain. In fact, we just announced this last week that we'd brought in Meetup, which is a project that probably many people don't know about, but a project to create a new legal, real world, run by real law people, real court system type stuff, but for the blockchain, headed up by Vinay Gupta. I don't know if any of you know of him from Ethereum fame. And this is a project that will create an alternative court system based on maritime law and based on the practice of creating an alternative national court system that people can contract into. And this is the basis of all arbitrators and arbitration type agreements that you can enter into legally, that will allow legal contracts that actually have blockchain implementation of smart contracts to actually exist in the world, where they're tied together, and when something goes wrong, because some things do go wrong, those will be able to go to a alternative court system that will be supported for anyone anywhere in the world, regardless of the country they're in, as the first form of recourse. You still have to go if that doesn't work out, or if people want to challenge that, or they don't follow the decisions of that arbitration. You still may have to deal with national courts. It's not a perfect solution, but it allows you to do something now we couldn't do before, and that's that we can take real world assets, gold, corn, oil, wheat, cattle, other things, and actually lock them up in titles on the blockchain. And this will lead to you being able to do things like buy your house your next house or your next flat on your cell phone. That's where this is going. So to make all this work, we have created a very interesting crypto economic system that uses two tokens. And two tokens are important because for 5,500 years of banking, there were always two forms of currency. Then about a little over 140 years ago or so, most of the world went to a single currency within nations because they wanted to basically create an ability to control currency. Prior to that, there were literally thousands and thousands of different currencies in the world. In the United States alone, there were 4,000 currencies in circulation in 1850. This is not known by most people. And these were called banknotes. The banknotes you would get when you would take your assets to the bank, and they would give you these banknotes. Most economists, macro economists, would now agree that that was an error. Taking all of our money and making it one currency was a bad decision. When we did that and we created these, what happened is that our assets and the thing we used to spend for liquidity became the same form of currency. Prior to that in the world, these were always separate. Gold or stones, precious metals were used to move between monetary systems and as mechanisms of asset transactions of consequence. Those were known as specie. Everything else was script. By the way, that goes back to clay tablets in Egypt. You can see them at the Cairo Museum 5,500 years ago. First token system in the world was actually Egypt. Bridge coin will exist in many flavors. There'll be bridge coin Swiss franc, bridge coin USD, bridge coin Japanese yen. And it is a stable token, meaning it is pegged to the thing that it is a flavor of. And it will include things that are hard commodities as well, like oil, energy, corn or rice. Sweet coin is a completely different animal. Sweet coin is a membership token that people that join this economy get as an indication of their stake in the economy. And based on their stake in the economy, they get to borrow more from the assets that they have. They get interest-free loans, not just one. They can have every loan they get interest-free. By the way, you will be able to take all your assets, stick them on your telephone as we get each asset class, and you'll be able to create as many different loans for yourself with as many different terms as you want. So you want a 10-year loan with a balloon payment? Fine. You want a 5-year loan that's amortized? Fine. No problem whatsoever. You'll get interest, you'll get free settlement. This will, because you don't need to use banks and credit card systems, we will be replacing those with an alternative system of point of sale that's yet to be announced. And you will be able to do free crypto to fiat conversions. So today, if you want to move large sums of money from fiat world into the crypto world, you're going to pay a bunch of money. And if you then try to go the other way, you're going to actually have a problem, because if it's a large sum of money like $100 million, you probably aren't going to be able to find enough liquidity to actually move that. Which means that real world serious business, like say Walmart's supply chain, really can never actually work in Bitcoin. In the system we have today, it would never actually be able to work. For lots of reasons, but for liquidity alone, it wouldn't be able to work. Plus the cost would be too great. It would actually cost somebody moving back and forth between crypto and fiat currency, and if you've never done any of that, you know what I'm talking about, you pay high fees for that. So you can't really use this in trade. So because of that, we are creating in different legal jurisdictions, the first ones will be in the United States, Switzerland, and the UK, crypto to fiat bridges licensed and controlled by the regulations of those countries as exchanges or bank or commodity exchanges or money services business, depending on the legal jurisdiction, depends on what the law says you have to be. And so all that's part of the project. All of this is to basically address this one problem here. And at this, I'd like to introduce Robert, one of our developers, who actually is from Geneva. And I wanted him to tell you a little bit about how this all kind of works for the real world.
Thank you, Scott. So, yes, I'm Robert, and I'm going to continue the unusual story about 2 coins. So let me go back for a second only. And so Scott gave you an amazing explanation about liquidity, what is the liquidity and how it connects with the assets. And just let's have a few exercises before going further. In the case of our world, yes, when we exchange things, in your opinion, what is the best form of the liquidity? Anyone? Maybe somebody would like to answer. What is the best form of the liquidity in our world?
Cash.
Cash, exactly. I have exactly the same opinion. I don't know if everybody makes like a paper of it or research saying it, but for me it's a cash, it's a money. So what we want to do, in fact, is, okay, so how we measure the cash? Yes, it's the US dollars, it's the stable fiat thing which builds the economy, okay? And when we have these assets and we want to have this, to transform them into the liquidity, the best way we can do it is actually to measure them in the cash. So if you have the laptop like here, yes, what is the value of it? Yeah, one can say 1,000. The other one can say 1,500 Swiss franc. We can argue, but if I would show you, yes, 1,000 of Swiss franc in a banknote, everyone will agree that this is 1,000, okay? And with Ether, you go to the cryptocurrency, okay, so this is like tangible things. And with the Ether, okay, one day is 300, the other day 400, yesterday 220. And even so, yes, we have the other things to measure, yes, like something we can think like, okay, Ether is a currency. We don't want it, in fact, to build the economy. That's why we need the bridge coin. Bridge coin is something which will really represent when everybody can agree that, okay, 100 bridge coins is the notion that, you know, we can trade, we can build. It's the foundation for the liquidity, it's the foundation for the economy. And that's why in the previous stage the liquidity was on the base. Yes, that's what we are building as a foundation. So this is pretty unusual. Okay? So we have the bridge coin basically to value things, and the sweet coin. And the sweet coin is very interesting. Why we need sweet coin? Yes. So short story because yes.
It's pegged to a fiat currency, which increases and decreases in value relative to other currencies. So how is the bridge coin more stable than currency?
Okay, so what Scott mentioned, there is no one bridge coin. There will be as many bridge coins as fiat currencies. So we will have. So think about bridge coin as a family, in fact. So USD bridge coin, Euro bridge coin, Swiss franc bridge coin, pound bridge coin, and so on. And there is a lot of operations and mechanics, basically, to assure that the bridge coin behaves like a fiat. So it's not like it's fixed with the value. We build all the economy around it with brains from economics universities, making sure that first it works, and second it obtains all the regulations with the government and other stuff.
So you need the bank license?
Yes and no.
Yes.
So for
Yes and no.
That's not possible.
No, it
I
is.
think it is.
I mean,
you need the bank license, otherwise you can't leverage.
depends where are we going. Yes, as soon as we go outside,
Okay.
then where we are in the project. Yes, then I agree with you, and Scott will give you a better explanation afterwards. Then at some point we will need the banking license. We are already collaborating with organizations who will solve a few things for us. But yeah, think out the Scott, and later on there will be probably questions for that.
Sorry, on the stability point.
Sorry,
On the stability point.
this is a stable coin.
So you're saying it's fiat pegged? it's surely only as stable as the currency it's pegged to.
Right.
Absolutely, it's never going to be.
Right. That's the goal. That's our design goal. We are building the models, simulations.
Liquidity demands that it not be quite as stable because you're using market makers to create liquidity. So there has to be a benefit to slight movements above the peg value and slight movements below the peg value for people to basically make money out of providing liquidity.
All right, but if the
To make
value
the
of
flow,
that-
yes.
If the value of that fiat changes considerably.
But that's what you do every day doing business in US dollars.
Okay, so if I want to pay with a Bridgecoin, I want to buy that laptop, it could be worth 1,000 Bridgecoins, or it could be worth 1,500 Bridgecoins.
No, that's the thing. It can fluctuate only slightly. Yes, if I will show you 100 Bridgecoins, you want to be sure that it's more or less with a very, very tiny epsilon difference to $100, not 100 ethers, which today are worth 230. Tomorrow will be, we don't know. Yes.
Yeah.
So the big thing is that to understand, okay, we want a fiat somehow.
Actually, related to that, so there will be market makers then selling the Bridgecoin when the demand increases.
That's the part of our mechanic.
Sorry?
That's the part of our mechanism. Sorry, yes, to one of the mechanisms we are, making sure that this Bridgecoin will be stable.
Yeah, and in terms of licenses, you don't need a license to lend crypto. It's not covered by banking regulation yet. Yeah, they will get you later. At some point you might need it, but I mean.
Which is why we believe it's important to have the licensing within two separate legal structures. So there's a foundation which controls the protocols, which are open source and available to anyone to use for anything. The second is legal structures within each legal jurisdiction, which create the bridge that allows you to basically move from the real world into the crypto world and back, and those do need licenses.
Okay, great. I think we understand that the Bridgecoin is, what it is, and we can, bind it together with the economy. So, yes, thank you for the questions. That's right. So, now let's go for the use case a little bit. So when we've been talking about the assets, okay, one way to think about applying assets into the crypto or digital world is basically to digitalize them and do something with them. We have hundreds of of projects trying to do that. Yes, to digitalize the assets. We are not doing that. We are a little bit above. So we, as a Sweetbridge, we want to basically build the alliance with everybody who can bring the value, who can take the assets, and making usable. And now what we are doing, taking to another level. So here is a very simple diagram of graphics, which reduce the problem of the supply chain and the hidden value there. So basically, as an actor says, there's a fabric, there's a nature, client. Of course, there's a payment, there's some work and order and goods, and transfer of the goods. So what's the problem here? Anybody?
Delay in payment?
Exactly. That's the thing in the middle. Yes. There is a goods which are transferred, but we don't value them. Yes. So we make the contract, we made the promise that this is the value of it, and now it's somehow locked. Yes. So if I'm Qualcomm, you are from Nokia ordering 10,000 of my microprocessors. Some of them you have in the market. You always try to build everything, all the economy, yes, to provide constant supply. Be on top of the production and the microprocessors. Yes, you are creating and shipping to me as a Nokia, and that's it. Oh, so you are Nokia. And then to make the value out of it. Yes, the time frame when I'm creating those microprocessors, shipping to you, it's pretty long, and there have to be a lot of investment, somehow credit, a value locked before it will get finally, ultimately valued using the fiat. Yeah, so the final liquidity we can exchange. So yes, that's right. And what we can do with this here. So Scott mentioned about unlocking this liquidity. So whatever assets you can imagine, you can transfer it into the bridge coin and use it as a liquidity to do other stuff. Pay to somebody, to make other contract and so on. The easy example probably might be with the Ethers nowadays. So I guess that most of you you hold some Ethers or any other crypto. And everybody believes, okay, not believes, but probably all of us know that it will go. Yeah, that's why we are here. That we are doing the blockchain projects and so on. So we think maybe that if you hold, I have 1 Bitcoin or whatever, in a year it will be more expensive and I will gain the money. And can I do better? I mean, I'm just holding, I have the investment, I made the investment. Yes, I put the dollars and get the Bitcoin and expecting to grow. So if you try to connect those two pictures, yes, the Bitcoin I'm holding or having in a wallet, and this picture is exactly the same. I have the Bitcoin, but it does nothing. It's locked. Yes, I'm just expecting that it will grow in the future. I can do better. Yes, I can transform it to the value, lock it, have it in the credit, and make liquidity out of it without selling it. So there is this.
May I ask a question? In this example you're giving, probably the bank said, okay, I'll give you 100. And you say, that's a pity because it's worth 150. So you're talking about that liquidity?
That's the economy, yes. But it's still better, yes?
Well,
if you have this.
No, if you look at the rules of the loan, which is underlying of this transaction, it will say that probably the 50 extra belongs to the bank as long as it's not paid.
Okay, but we will go to that point a little bit later. We will go a little bit to that later. Okay, so let me just.
I don't want to be nasty, but I like to understand it.
No, that's a very good question. But just think about it. Yes. So what we want to do, in fact, yes, to make the liquidity add additional value, like a bank, like with the credit in a bank. Yes, but something you already own, you already hold. Okay. Thing is that we connect that. Okay, there are the physical assets, which doesn't bring the value. Which has the locked value, and any other kind of assets like the crypto ether. So we can define those segments in our supply chain, in our contracts, in our economy. In every of them, you see there is a segment which is undervalued, and we are bringing a solution for that. And okay, so this is just some note that. According to PwC, 3.5 trillion of euros are locked in this process here, as in any of these segments, between the contracts and the payment, waiting, and so on. So this should bring the answer for your question. Basically, using the system, we are giving you the bridge coins based on the value of the assets you already hold. So we are constructing some mechanism, algorithms, which will try to, using risk analysis and some models, to evaluate how much you can take from the value, from the asset which is locked anyway. And so the operation is what we call UOU. Yeah, so you are borrowing to yourself. So you are a bank to yourself, and we as a system, yes, we just kind of the judge here, that if something goes wrong, yes, we will repair the economy. Of course, at the end you can lose, but we try to make a market in a way that we will protect you from that. So let's say if you have some asset which is worth 1,000, but is very speculative. We will not allow you, yes, to make thousands, let's say thousands Swiss franc. We will not allow you to transform it or to make the thousands of Swiss franc bridge coins, because it's too risky. If ones go down, yes, everything falls down, and we will need to liquidate. So everything depends on the assets you are doing here, and it's a very, very long-term project. So depending on the alliance, on the companies there which will be involved, Scott will give you more information about it. The valuation, yes, will be different for any of it, and how the money flows there. Where is the value? How we make the money? How you make the money and everything. So this is this unusual and sweet thing about the second coin. So normally there is a small fee, like in a bank, okay, where you borrow something to cover all the operations, to cover some losses whenever you're borrowing. However, when you hold the sweet coin, it's an investment into the economy, it's an investment into the platform, community, and for yourself. So bridge coin is made to be stable coin. Sweet coin is made to be speculative with a model of a constant growth. Holding the sweet coins will have two purposes. So one Scott already mentioned. You can, having the sweet coin, you contribute to the economy, to the community, and you make all your loans or your borrows here, so the credits, free. You don't need to pay because you invested. Yes, you already paid for that. And the model you already have, yes, it simulates that, assures based on economists, that it will grow. Yes, that there is a fundamental need for such system to unlock this assets, this liquidity, the value in the liquidity, and hence it will grow. Every holder of the sweet coin will gain as well. So there's a mutual interest here, and that's the brilliant and the sweet thing about the sweet coin. And unless there is something very specific question, I would like to pass for the others.
First question which comes to my mind: what about fraudulent invoices? How do you sort out these?
Good question. So as I mentioned before, yes. So there is this risk analysis mechanism somewhere in between, when we value the contracts and the assets. So this will be covered there. Yes. Sometimes, for example, you might not be able. Yes. In some corner cases, you will need to pay some fee if there is a huge risk of a fraud, or if you don't know you. Yes, we will maybe don't allow you. Yeah. So it's like in a bank.
The second protocol we're introducing is a settlement bus. What it does is it eliminates counterparty risk in commerce chains. If you want to understand it, I would recommend downloading our white paper. What it does is basically if let me have you come up here. If Hamid, nice over here. If Hamid here owes Robert 10 francs, okay, and Robert owes me 10 francs,
Whoa.
okay, and if Robert doesn't pay me, the settlement bus can take the money and actually go right around Robert.
Which in the real world you need a third party.
So in the real world, you'd need a third party, plus you'd need to have things that don't exist today. But our replacement for the bank funds transfer mechanisms and credit card mechanisms allow you to do something which is used in credit card systems today around the world, known as a chargeback. This allows you to basically take and isolate the risk instead of having the risk be in the system dealt with by an interest charge or a fee that's charged across the system, like what happens in credit cards, you can isolate the bad actor in the system and basically cut them out of the system in order to do this. To explain why this is possible in the supply chain, there's $54 trillion of GDP. GDP is profit. That means after all the expenses are paid, after all of the bad actors, after all the hurricanes and volcanoes, after all the frauds, there's $54 trillion left over in the system today. And that's why it works.
But what is that of a definition? GDP is profit. Is that a definition from a government?
Well, no, it's just that most people think GDP means the number of sales in the economy. It actually means the increase in value, which is, kind of in financial terms, the profit.
So just one quick question.
Yes.
So if you want to simplify that risk that you talked about, that's really Sweetcoin that takes care of that risk that I get compensated for if I want to take on some of that risk. Can you explain to us where Sweetcoin enters? Because I don't see it here, and I know it enters somewhere, so it's enters, how you insert it there.
So actually your assumption about what Sweetcoin's doing isn't quite right.
Okay.
So Sweetcoin isn't an insurance policy for the network. So it isn't a mechanism that's basically underwriting the network. The actual fees that are paid when people don't have Sweetcoin are what basically does that.
Say it again. The fees?
So the interest charges and settlement fees and fiat conversion fees that
which
people
are occurring there in that mechanism?
Well, which would occur in this mechanism if you don't have any Sweetcoin. Okay.
So you have to be a member.
You have to be a member, but you don't have to be a member to use the system.
Got it, I get it.
So you can, just like, the nation of Switzerland, if you're a citizen of the nation of Switzerland, you get special services. You get things that you can get that somebody who is a visitor to Switzerland, like myself, can't access. And you get that because you paid taxes and you supported the local government and the local economy. You have a vested stake. In the same way, in the Sweetbridge economy, if you buy and own Sweetcoin in a sufficient amount to that's a ratio of your actual economic transaction activity, then you basically get a bunch of things for free. But most people, the way the system is designed, will basically use the system without a sufficient amount of Sweetcoin, which means they will generate fees when they use the system, and those fees basically subsidize the losses in the system, which are designed to mirror the same losses. We actually need losses in the system, believe it or not, because national governments, the nation of Switzerland included, print more fiat currency every year. And because they print more fiat currency every year, if we wanted to keep our pegged currencies equal to those currencies, we need to have the same 2% or so devaluation that those currencies have, which means we have to have enough loss in the system to actually cause the value of the currency to drop. Otherwise, our currency would grow and grow and grow and become worth more and more and more money in comparison to the fiat currency. So almost all industrial nations print enough money on an average over the course of, say, a decade to depreciate their currency by 2%. The reason they do this is very sound. They want you to spend it, not hold it. And the reason they want you to spend it is that the size of the economy is controlled by how many times this actually moves through the economy. So the more rapidly it goes from one party to the next, if I pay this 20 franc note to you, and you pay that 20 franc note to him, and he brings that to me, then that was 60 francs that went through the economy, not 20. And so in order for you to be willing to do that, the government doesn't want this, and they shouldn't want this, to be something you think is going to be more valuable tomorrow than it is today. Because if it is, it's like Bitcoin, so you don't want to actually sell it. You want to hold it. And that's, by the way, a very simple economic lesson on why Bitcoin will never be a currency for trade, because it's designed to inflate in value and become more scarce. So it can't ever actually be, it won't ever incentivize the right behavior. So it can't ever actually be that.
Question on the example you gave with the invoice.
Yes.
In traditional banking, actually, a similar system already exists called factoring, where you can get an advance payment for
Yes.
your invoices.
Yes.
So where do you see the difference that people who don't use this yet?
Well, the only difference is,
into this system?
yeah, the only difference is that the cost would be substantially lower. So in factoring today, there are two models, as you know. One is an interest-based model, the other is a haircut model. In the haircut model, if the invoice is worth 1,000 francs, I might be told, well, I'll pay you that invoice now, but I'm only going to pay you 980 francs, and I'll keep 20. This is actually the most common model for factoring. This is what happens, by the way, when a merchant accepts your credit card. When they accept your credit card, they're agreeing, in order to get paid now, I'm going to actually take a haircut on the price of what you're paying. And that haircut varies depending on the part of the world you're in, anywhere from about 1.5% to as much as 9%. So that means they don't make as much money as you think they do, because the rest of the money is held by the credit card company, and factoring works the same way. In the bridge coin economy, if you have a sufficient number of sweet coin, there's no discounting on that invoice at all. And though we may not give you 100% of the value of the invoice, we give you, say, 80% now and 20% when it's paid, you get 100% of the value.
Would people able to trade in Sweetcoin?
Yes, but they wouldn't want to. Sweetcoin is designed to be the only token that you never ever want to sell.
It's speculative.
Because, so think about it. If assuming that this kind of system catches on and people actually realize that you can create liquidity out of things without needing fiat currency, and you can do this on your own without a bank. It's not that banks go away, by the way. Banks will continue to exist. And in fact, the need for banks and the types of services they'll offer will change, but will actually become larger. I'd love to talk to anyone about that afterwards, but why I believe that will happen. But if you can do this, why would you want to get rid of something that lets you borrow money for free, convert it into other currencies for free, and conduct transactions for free, so you have no credit card charges, no banking charges? Why would you want to get rid of it? Because as soon as you get rid of it, now you have to start paying those. Well, about the only time in life I can imagine when I would want to do that is when I'm getting towards a point in my life where I'm not doing any of those things anymore, and I just basically am living off of what I have. But then maybe I would still want to do that because I might want to actually pass what I have on to my children. So
If the value increases, you can sell it and make profit.
sure, you can sell it to make profit, but why sell it to make profit? You can just put it in a vault and borrow from it and use the money that you borrowed from it, and then let it make more profit. If you think it's going to be more profitable, why would you sell it? You can actually put Sweetcoin in that same vault that invoice is in and actually borrow from it.
But only partially, correct?
Only partially, that's correct.
It's like with the Bitcoin, yes? You can buy the Bitcoin to make the investment, and here you can use the Bitcoin as a collateral, yes, to transform it, yes, to the second level of the liquidity. And then, of course, normally, okay, if you expect that this will grow and you can make money, you can, just have two liquidity things of it. You don't sell it unless you need the money, unless you need you want to you need to have instantly like a big injection of money in any form.
So if you owned a bar of gold, and that bar of gold was sitting in your house, in a vault inside your home somewhere, the only time you would probably want to sell that bar of gold would be in some kind of special circumstance. But you wouldn't want to sell it on a day-to-day basis to basically...
Well, it depends. I mean, if there's uncertainty, let's say, in your case, with Sweetcoin, you think about regulatory issues, you think about your team, maybe you're gonna have a heart attack tomorrow.
Mhm.
And if you
Yeah,
do
we've checked.
then, I'm talking about after the ICO, you know, then the very next day, we drop that.
Yeah.
So I will probably, the sweet coin will probably drop 20%, let's say. That's just like if Elon Musk drops that today,
Sure.
that's probably gonna drop 30,
Of course.
40%, you know?
I do.
So, and that's what I got compensated for that uncertainty,
Yeah.
right? So there is, you know, a case to sell some of it and
So what I'm trying to point out is that I agree with all of those examples, and I agree people will do that. But Sweetcoin is not a speculative token. It is not like Bitcoin.
okay.
It does not, Bitcoin only has value because of sentiment. Okay? Sweetcoin has an actual economically measurable value based on the fees it basically eliminates for its owner. And that those fees have direct relationship to a cash flow event.
So your business has to grow in order for Sweetcoin to be of value because the transactions.
That's
they
correct.
just- okay.
In fact, Sweetcoin has an economic value that in our user interface, we broadcast.
In fact, it's about
Because we don't want people to use Sweetcoin for just speculative
Yeah,
activity.
That has to be.
We want it to
true
be
value.
used for true value, intrinsic value.
Yes.
Now we know that the market will actually speculate, okay? Particularly if the network is growing. People will say that it's going to be worth more in the future, so I'm going to do that. We're not trying to prevent that.
Oh,
We
no,
can't
that's
prevent
healthy.
that.
Yeah.
That's healthy.
Yeah, the function.
But we actually have a very innovative token release model because a project of this scale and size needs a lot of money over time. And our model for our token release is tied to, say, capped token, limited supply, released at 1% of the remainder in tranches, tied to the absolute provable economic value of the token in the network. Which means the value we charge for it is demonstratable. If the market, I'll get your question in a second. If the market says it's worth twice that, 100% of everything above what the demonstratable, absolute, measurable value of the token to people that use it in the system goes to liquidity in the system.
I mean, 1%, you said 1%, 1%.
No, 100%.
I mean, the observation is like this, that we release only the sweet coins when the economy grows. So the sweet coin is always backed by the economy growth. It's not that we release once and there is, you know.
It's a self-correcting mechanism.
Yes.
Exactly.
And as a result, it has intrinsic value because it absolutely offsets fees, so you have intrinsic value. So it is absolutely not a security. It's purely it's a benefit like owning a membership fee in a golf resort that allows you to have green fees for free. You know, it has a value because you get those green fees for free. That's what it's like. So yes, gentlemen.
Who is printing this sweet?
So Sweetcoin is created.
And how? What is the rule? What are the rules? How
So Sweetcoin is only created once, and there'll only be 100 million of Sweetcoin ever. It's just released and sold in tiny tranches. Each tranche is 1% of the remainder, which means you never get to the end. If you take 1% of the remainder, there's always a remainder. It's like cutting something in half. You always have the half that's left over. So there's always 99% left over, right? So you keep cutting it by 1%. So the number of coins that get released at different levels at different trigger points in the economic system's growth are always decreasing. So it's fewer and fewer and fewer coins that are released in each tranche because 1% of the remainder always causes the number to go down. And we've modeled this out to like 1,000 trillion, and there's still 3% of the Sweetcoin in existence that hasn't been released at 1,000 trillion.
But if the amount is limited, how can you guarantee that there will not be inflation?
No, there is inflation in Sweetcoin.
Deflation.
Oh, there could be deflation as well.
It's limited and the economy is growing,
Yep.
I guess.
Yeah. So it's Bridgecoin that we care about that happening with. So Bridgecoin is minted based on the deposit of an asset.
Bridge code is something else. I asked Sweetcoin.
Okay.
Bridgecoin, in the case of the Bridgecoin, I do not see the difference between the Bridgecoin and the fiat monies.
Correct.
This is a one-to-one relationship.
Yes.
It's a ratio.
Yes.
It is strictly stick to that.
Yes.
And there is no difference. This is just like a reference to existing fiat currencies.
It is, but it's not true that for every Sweetcoin in circulation that there's for Sweetcoin franc that there's a Sweetcoin franc sitting in some vault somewhere. That's not true. You're using there's a difference between a tethered cryptocurrency like Tether and a pegged cryptocurrency like Sweetcoin. And Tether is using the fact that banks that are creditor banks would like to have deposits of fiat currency because they can lend it out using marginal lending rates. And so they will be willing to hold fiat currency in their bank accounts and back that with a token. In that case, there's literally one token for every fiat currency unit. In Bridgecoin, that's not true. In Bridgecoin, the liquidity, the fiat currency, is provided by market making. There are 5 market making mechanisms in our economy. And market making is done by small shifts of value that allow high volume, high speed traders to basically make very small amounts of money frequently in a system which has noise. So for example, if something drops by 1%, you start buying it because its price dropped below the peg point at 1%. Buying it actually brings the price back up because you reduce the supply. Now it goes above the price, you basically start selling it because you're now above where it is. You take the profit between the buy and the sell. So if that's happening many times during the course of a day, very small moves in value multiple times a day can actually end up being a very large sum of money.
Answering your question, so I think it's very related what you said, because we can't prevent all the cases. Yes, it can drop. Yes, it can deflate. What is important here are 2 observations. Yes, so first observation is that Sweetcoin is only released when the economy grows, when there is a need for it. Okay.
Will it be just
so I will give you the example.
When the economy is dropping?
So I would
just think about 2008 if it happens again.
Yes.
So we've done, this is a big concern of ours, obviously. And so we've done a lot of modeling to try to understand using something called stochastic models that basically create a bunch of variables that are scattered randomly around to see, kind of what happens, and then you can run Monte Carlo simulations to kind of see what happens. And what you're trying to make sure is that the system is stable and that it's not that it doesn't change in value, because Sweetcoin, what I'm not saying is that Sweetcoin can't go down in value. If the network actually shrinks in size, it does go down in value. It's just that it doesn't, its value is directly related to the size. So you take something like 2008, what was the actual shrinkage in the global economy?
Okay, so not so much a percentage, but
It was very small.
I don't know, 5% maybe?
2.7.
Yeah, it's 3%.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay, well, I can take that.
Yeah,
2% less.
so the point is, what is true is that early in the system's life, when there's a small set of assets and when the number of assets are limited and the amount of trading volume is small, the system is at higher risk. So it becomes much easier to create stability as it gets larger, which is the reason why we've targeted the supply chain. So in supply chain, businesses ultimately have to pay that invoice. They have to fulfill the order and get paid for the order. And so at some point there is a closure out of the system, and this creates a certain amount of trading velocity. that's always going on just trying to settle that, right? So that actually is probably the most significant in the models we've run. That's been the most significant dampener on price fluctuations. It's just that there's always demand in the market. And there's always demand because you're actually settling real world trade. The reason that isn't true in crypto markets today, even when they get quite large in value, even though people say that they should, it doesn't actually happen. And the reason is that people are in the market mostly for speculative reasons. So the, speculators can, of certain kinds, make money whether the market's going up or down, because what they do is they'll trade one cryptocurrency off another. They'll move from Bitcoin to Dash, and move from Dash to Litecoin, and move from Litecoin back to Bitcoin. And they'll do an arbitrage around that stuff. And then they'll switch it around the other way. You know, they're constantly moving, because what they're trying to do is basically make money out of small arbitrages that exist in unstable environments for short periods of time. And so their interest is speculation. So the more stable the environment is, the less money they can make. And so they actually breed on instability, and that in itself creates more instability. And so these are known as type 2 chaos systems, where just the prediction of what's happening in the market, or even measuring the market itself, actually affects the results in the market, whether there's anything intrinsic. If you have real world trade though, real goods, things that people have to eat, gas you have to put in the car, you know, stuff like that, electricity bills you got to pay, then you end up with something which is non-discretionary. People have to do it. They have to spend the money. So their reasons for being in the market aren't speculative. Their reasons in the market are life, living life. And that creates substantial stability. Yeah.
How does the system determine the amount of sweet coins that you need to own in order to be...
Oh, great question.
Hoping
to avoid this. So you asked the one question I didn't want anyone to ask, but it's the right question. So the answer is we are not quite finished modeling what those ratios are, because changes in those ratios actually affect some pretty powerful dynamics in systems stability. But notionally what you would want them to be, and unfortunately this is not what it will be, but we're going to try to get it as close to it, is that it would be the total amount of assets that are basically collateralized in the system divided by the amount of sweet coin that is in vaults being used by members in the system versus outside of the system that's being held by speculators. This is knowable in the blockchain. It's very easy to know what that number is. That ratio would be what you would want. And it will be something very close to that ratio. What that means is that as the number of sweet coin in population grows and the number of assets grows, the sweet coin becomes more valuable, but the amount of sweet coin you need to basically offset the same amount of fees reduces. So I need less sweet coin to get rid of the same amount of interest, or I need less sweet coin to conduct international foreign exchange for free, or whatever. And that means that that as new asset classes are added to the system, somebody can immediately benefit who owns sweet coin with new classes of assets. So as we add things like real estate or things like equipment and other classes of assets, you don't need to go acquire more sweet coin in order to still have some of the benefits of it. And that was we struggled hard to create that economic design. Because one of the things that we wanted to make sure that didn't happen was that you didn't end up with a bunch of people that became gravity wells that just held large sums of it, like what has happened in Bitcoin, where miners own a disproportionate share of all the Bitcoin in the market. Yeah.
So if somebody comes as an asset that Bitcoin that want to get into the system, because I understand that you're trying to create value to you issue coins, but you create value. That's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah.
What if the asset that is getting into the system valuation, or you have a lot of speculation behind where if I have.
Yeah, so what happens, like, for example, if the value of the asset becomes nothing all overnight?
Or I want to get the bridge coin with, I want to get into the system with an asset.
Yes.
Which is overvalued, for example.
Sure. There's always the risk of assets being overvalued. I mean, that's kind of what happened behind a lot of the real estate problems in 2008. So you had these marginal assets that. So interestingly, so I don't know how many people know about what happened in 2008 in the United States with the bailout of the banks, but there was a fund established by a U.S. taxpayer expense to create a fund to basically buy up the toxic assets, these assets that had become worth less than the loans that they were backing, because of bank law. The bank ratios couldn't be maintained for assets to the loan portfolio, so they had to get these toxic assets off their books, which frankly is just it's a legal problem that is really related to a steady state. And let me give you an example of why this is true. That entity that bought all these toxic assets, guess what happened? It made money. It made money. In fact, it made more money than all the bailout from that occurred from the taxpayers. And the reason is that if assets have intrinsic value, and if you look at the bulk of the assets in the world, they have intrinsic value. They're hard assets, things like real estate, precious metals, things that have hard assets of value. In an economic downturn, what happens is people's ability to acquire the asset is reduced, and therefore the price suffers for a short period of time, but it returns because it's intrinsic. So take real estate, for example. As long as we are growing in the world to have more people in the world, guess what? Real estate's going to go up in value. Why? Because there's just more people and less real estate. They're not making any more of it. That's kind of just an axiom. So what you really want to do when there's one of these black swan crises is you actually don't want to dump a bunch of stuff on the market to eliminate it, because that actually makes it worse. And in fact, that's actually what happened. And the reason that we had to have bailouts for banks and others was because as they started trying to stay within the regulatory requirements and started trying to sell things off, find people to sell them, and dump them, they couldn't dump them fast enough because the prices kept falling. And so if you take a whole bunch of anything and dump it on the market when nobody is basically secure, guess what? They don't buy it. And so it looks like the value is far worse than it actually is. So the worst thing in the world for us to do would be to design a system where when there's a crash on intrinsic assets, those assets get dumped, because it would actually make the problem worse, right? So we did a bunch of modeling on this to try to figure out what you do. And what you do is you basically transfer those assets to special treasury entities inside of our system. And treasury entities, this is the role for banks and other people of a different flavor. This is why they're going to make more money. They basically take these assets off the books of the system in exchange for paying out the loan, wiping out the loan. And they do this because they get a piece of the fees. In fact, about 50% of the fees in the system actually go to these parties. And they collect these fees in treasury contracts, smart contracts, that build up and up and up and up. And they get to use the money that's collected in the fees that they didn't actually invest themselves to basically go off and acquire these assets when they fall in price, and by contributing additional stake to the system. So they take the stuff that they're getting and they have to match that with an additional amount. And what this does is it basically creates a form of insurance. And that it's insurance that's actually not marginally financed, it's 100% financed. So that when a crash occurs, you start pulling assets out of the system and you transfer it to those treasury entities. Those treasury entities, in exchange for taking this risk and tying up their capital, when the markets drop, they get these assets that they now get to sell after holding on to them for the profit that that produces. And so what this does is it actually takes crashes like 2008 and moderates them. You can't make them go away. It moderates them. That's all it does. And this is how you would actually want to design the system if you could kind of take the foresight of, of the hindsight of what we have now. This is kind of what you'll do. Now, this doesn't mean we figured out all the ways that something could break, because the problem with complex systems is as soon as you say anything about what the system is likely to do, you will actually influence the system in ways that you can't model. And so all we can do is say, well, let's try modeling what happened in 2008 and see if it's actually any better. And it was. Now, there's another thing that happens in the system that I haven't made clear, and that's if the asset value drops, like you have Bitcoin falling below the price, what happens is you have a call provision. It's a point where you have to sell the asset, or you have to contribute more assets, or you have to pay down your loan in order to not have your assets sold. And so it works like a margin call, in a stock trade or something like that. And what that does is that allows for devaluing assets that occur where there's there's not an instant immediate drop, but where the drop is gradual enough for the system to actually monitor markets to recognize the values dropping, to say, look, you're going to lose your asset if you don't increase your amount of assets in your portfolio, or if you don't pay back some of the debt. And unlike the banking environment, though, if our system sells your asset, we just take a 2% fee, and anything that was left in the value of the asset goes back to you. So it's...
Great, I think we have to stop
Yep.
here. And
Thank you.
I hope there was lots of insight. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's a great talk.